Ukraine and Russia exchanged long-range blows targeting the energy facilities, logistics centers and production sites. Kyiv is also looking for alternative routes for grain shipment as Moscow ramps up its missile production capacities. And to talk about it all, we're joined by Bohdan Nahaylo, the editor-in-chief of Kyiv Post. Good evening, Bohdan.
Good evening.
So, what will Ukraine do with all the grain it cannot export via its destroyed port in Odessa?
Well, I think that question shouldn't be addressed to Ukraine. It should be addressed to its neighbors. Will Poland allow that grain to pass into Europe as once it did? Will the arrangement with Moldova and Romania work? What about the UN? Quiet all of a sudden. Guterres was so active about the grain corridor. I mean, I was in Lviv 2 years ago or so. Erdogan was there and he was there. And wow, the grain corridor is so important for feeding the world. Why
well,
the silence?
I can tell you, that's my guess. But I've learned that, the only actually recipient of Ukrainian grain this moment is the EU. So here's the answer, right?
But
Egypt doesn't need the Ukrainian grain anymore, apparently.
Well, it's changed. It used to be, I mean, the battle cry from the United Nations. I mean, I heard Guterres speak is, look, the Middle East, North Africa, parts of Asia depend on it. Africa, we can't block it. And that was the main thing. But suddenly it's off the agenda. And look, for Ukraine, of course, it's very important. But the question is, what will not only its neighbors do, but essentially the EU? Because, I mean, we can understand Polish farmers' concerns. We can understand the concerns of other countries. So this has to be somehow negotiated with Brussels so that subsidies are provided and that helping Ukraine doesn't mean it's helping Ukraine at the cost of its neighbors.
Right. Now, both Russia and Ukraine, they, as I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, they concentrate on attacking opponents' economy. And, if Ukraine attacks a Russian refinery, then Russia retaliates by attacking a steel plant like it happened today. Now, I'm wondering whether Ukraine can realistically hope to win this long-range, but still a war of attrition.
It's a terrible war of attrition. The Ukrainians, I think, wisely have been hitting into Russia, into the energy hubs, but also more recently the very visible elements supplying the population with goods, with postal goods, etc. And that's important psychologically because it's brought home to the Russians themselves that the war is not in Ukraine and that you're far away from it, but it's happening in your country now and you're paying the cost for what you're doing. So yes, of course, the Russians are retaliating. But this is nothing new. They've been doing this for almost 5 years. And that wasn't retaliation. Daily attacks, nightly attacks on postal services. I'm not talking about cities, hospitals, cultural centers. I'm talking about what makes life possible. When the Ukrainians started doing this, suddenly there was this response that, oh my God, the war is coming to us. What is happening? Don't the Ukrainians, even as we saw on Telegram, have any empathy for us? Ridiculous sort of arguments. So, yes, it's a war. It's a very nasty, costly war of attrition. And it's not even a case of who will blink first. It's a case of who will say, enough, stop for the moment, because we can't take this any further. For the Ukrainians, of course, who've been used to this suffering and this cost, the problem is not so much now, today, it's again the winter. What will happen, if their abilities to provide hot water, heating, energy will stop. And for the Russians, of course...
So what is Ukraine doing to avoid the
What can it do? What
situation
can it do? Does it stop fighting because because it's a nasty situation? Zelensky's position, whether he's right or not, is to carry the fight further into Russia and force Putin's circle, not maybe himself, but the businessmen.
Let me rephrase the question: Can Ukraine, somehow provide a better protection for these vital sites for,
No. It's admitting that it doesn't have the capacity not to stop the drones, but to stop the ballistic missiles. That's the big danger. That's the difference in the game. The ballistic missiles were rarely used by the Russians. Now it's a constant daily occurrence, and the Ukrainians are powerless. They don't have the weapons from the West, particularly from the US, the Patriot missiles and others similar types. And so for the moment, it's we don't know what to expect. I'm off to Kyiv tomorrow. I don't know what awaits me, on a daily basis, on a nightly basis. So, but this is in the later stages of the 5th year of all-out war and the 12th year of the war with Russia, which started in 2014. It's a price that the Ukrainians are paying and mostly are saying, we're prepared to put up with this in the hope that eventually something will crack in Moscow, within society, within business circles, and people will say enough there too. Maybe it's naive, but look at it from an outsider's perspective. What can the Ukrainians do at this stage?
Well, President Zelenskyy claims that Russia cannot wage its war without the help of North Korea. So the question here is, what can Ukraine do to at least limit, this support Russia receives from North Korea?
The only thing it can do is to make this fact known and amplify this knowledge. Or it's not just speculation. It's not just North Korea. There are Chinese parts. There are Iran has been very much a partner in the past and perhaps still is. And much depends on Washington, of course. With the procrastination and the vacillation and the prevarication that the Trump administration, not Americans, the Trump administration is showing, much will depend on them. And that's why Zelenskyy has launched his appeals directed mainly to the US, saying, hey, wake up, it's North Korea that is helping. Aren't you aware of this?
Well, Donald Trump's envoys, Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff, are reportedly planning a trip to both Moscow and Kyiv. And, the diplomatic efforts have led to rather limited results so far. So what proposals could they have this time, for both warring parties to somewhat accelerate this peace process?
I wouldn't even call them diplomatic efforts. These are business efforts, by businessmen close to Trump. These aren't diplomats. They've been negotiating with Moscow to get the best deal possible for the Trump administration and to grab as much of Ukrainian mineral wealth as they can as a price for helping Ukraine out. So, there are no illusions in Kyiv at this stage about a visit by Witkoff and Kushner. I think it would be very embarrassing for them to appear now. We are on the eve of the 35th anniversary of Ukraine's independence on the 24th of August. For them to appear, yes, I can understand Zelenskyy has to go through the motions to try and keep Trump engaged. But for most Ukrainians, this is fairly disgusting because they don't treat them as diplomats. They've never been to Kyiv. They've been and have met with Russian diplomats frequently. And what are they talking about? Diplomacy? The rule of international law? What are we talking about? What are these emissaries talking about? But to be fair, Zelenskyy also hasn't used professional diplomats. He's used people like Yermak and others around him who are also businessmen, lawyers, close to his circle, to try and get deals done, as opposed to professional diplomats playing by the rules, UN rules, diplomacy rules, etc. So the game goes on, shall we say.
Bohdan Nahaylo, editor-in-chief of Kyiv Post, was our guest this evening. Thank you so much, Bohdan. And thank you for watching, and stay with us for more interviews and news here on TVP World.